Online Insights, Who's the Bully Now? From Christian Schools International, Wednesday, April 15th, 2015. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. I'm Kevin Richards, and with us from Pine Rest Christian Mental Health Services are Dr. Carolyn King, MD, from Inpatient Services at Pine Rest, and Bob Vandepoel, Director of Employee and Church Assistance Programs. And we're talking about bullying today. This is an interactive webinar, meaning you and other participants are welcome to ask questions. Type your questions in the question box on the lower right. We'll save time at the end to answer. And if there are more questions than we have time for, we'll give them to Carolyn and Bob to answer offline, and they'll respond to your email address. This webinar will be posted on the Christian Schools International website, csionline.org. And let's see, Carolyn's the expert here, Bob, so it's either you or me. Which one of us is the bully?
Well, Kevin, I think we're going to find out in the next 60 minutes. Yes, Carolyn is the expert. Several months ago, you and I presented a workshop webinar for CSI on Christian school teen suicide prevention and postvention. Mm-hmm. Several of the questions had to do with the impact of bullying upon teen suicide. That triggered today's webinar. I'm very pleased to introduce to the CSI audience Dr. Carolyn King. She is a psychiatrist at Pine Rest Christian Mental Health Services. She works with children, adolescents, and adults. Dr. King is an active committee member with the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, producing online Facts for Families and resource centers with information regarding childhood health and mental health topics. She is the founder of Reach Out to Youth, a program which connects students aged 7 to 11 with careers in the medical arts and sciences. Dr. King is passionate. You're going to hear it. She is passionate about mental health. She has a special interest in educating and building bridges in the community to bring better understanding and acceptance about mental health. In fact, she encourages everybody to get a checkup from the neck up. Dr. King, bring it.
All right now. Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. So, who's the bully now? Well, we're going to start with a little story here, okay? And the story is about the principal and the dog bite. The principal calls the teacher into the office to discuss test scores. The teacher feels like the principal is blaming them for the students' low test scores. The teacher talks to student B, who is the lowest achieving student in the class, about their test scores. Student B feels like he's being picked on for being a low-achieving student. Student B tells student A to let him copy his homework, which is against student A's morals. Student A goes home and kicks the dog out of frustration. The dog is upset, goes outside, and bites the next person running by, who happens to be the principal. Alrighty, so why does bullying exist? And as a friend of mine says, life is forever 8th grade, and the animal kingdom is full of a dog-eat-dog way of life. The king of the jungle and being at the bottom of the food chain are expressions to describe the hierarchy of power, control, leadership, and authority. In the animal kingdom, fights arise to establish dominance. In humankind, wars arise for the same reasons. So the reasons that bullying exists is, as you can see on this slide, because of these disagreements and conflict, misunderstandings in perception, misunderstandings of intention. And as long as people are different and free will exists, there will be the potential for bullying. So the goals of this webinar are that we're going to define several words. One of the words is bullying. Another is humility and humiliation, the cycle of bullying, taking sides, the impact of bullying, signs and symptoms of the bullying cycle, and what to do about it. So almost every time I do a discussion, I have this quote involved. And this is John 1 of the Bible. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Words pack a powerful punch. Often we think of the bully as a physical one, yet the bully can be a moral one and a verbal one. In the story of the principal, the teacher, the students, and the dog, all three types of bullying occur. physical, moral, and verbal. The dog bites the principal after the student kicked him. Both of these are examples of physical bullying. After the student copied another student's homework is an example of moral bullying. After the principal talked to the teacher who talked to the student are both examples of verbal bullying. The cycle of bullying exists because of the perception or misperception of power. Was it really ever the principal or teacher's intention to bully with words? Was it their intention to motivate change or find a solution in the test score problem? Was the bullying implied in the tone, volume, and rhythm of the principal's voice? So who's the bully now? We'll start with the word bully and trace its etymology from its beginning to how it's changed to its current meaning. Alrighty, this word bully originates from the Dutch boel. It was applied to either gender, male or female, and in the 1500s, bully meant sweetheart, brother, lover, protector, and cherished one, as in a fine fellow. But as we know, the Netherlands is a place where Amsterdam exists, and it soon deteriorated to mean ruffian, dominance, power, aggressor, fear, as in pimp. There's legalized prostitution in Amsterdam. And so we can see where this word bully got its origins. So let's keep going. What about this behavior of bullying? Well, bullying has to be intentional. It involves an inequality of mental, physical, or social power. And its whole goal is to intimidate, humiliate, isolate, really to abuse a person. Bullying has to be habitual. Now, there are many, many types of bullying. The internet, which provides us with cyberbullying now. There's gender and sexuality, which is gay bullying. There's social status in fraternities and sororities. There's occupational status in the workplace, bullying. There's academic or school bullying. Economic status, which we see in neighborhoods, keeping up with the Joneses, for example, and athletic status, which is kind of a sports bullying. Now, what's so important about this cyberbullying is that on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Ask FM, YouTube, chat rooms, text messages, emails, you can see this cyberbullying, and what happens is it's anywhere, anytime, instant audience. So people who are cyberbullied are made to feel the target day and night. Now, because cyberbullying wasn't always a part of our existence, I'm going to give you a little example here. What if someone made a fake profile or website and put your worst pictures on it and called it Christians on Crack? That would not be nice, and it would be intentionally harmful. What would you do? How would you feel? Well, immediately you'd grab some upstanders. You'd tell the authorities to take the site down because it's slanderous. But even after the site was taken down, you would still feel the sting of that website. This is how bullying feels. The effects are long-lasting. The support needs to be long-lasting as well for the bully and the target, and to continue education about problematic behaviors in order to break this cycle. So why do people bully in the first place? Well, bullies want to climb the social ladder. And what's on that social ladder? So we're going to get a little psych here, okay? We're going to talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And when we look at the bottom rung of this pyramid, we all want to have our basic needs met for food, shelter, health, and security. That's those physiological and safety steps in the pyramid. As we move up this ladder, which can be equated to a social ladder, we want to be a larger part of the society. We want to feel love and belonging. And as we move up even further, we want to have self-esteem and confidence in our quest for spiritual enlightenment and the pursuit of knowledge. And that's what self-actualization is. Now, when our resources are scarce, we become protective and on guard. When we perceive our resources are at risk, we are at risk to become a bully. Remember, a person's perception is that person's reality. So how do we keep our reality in check? The way we keep our reality in check can be best said in Ecclesiastic 3:20. From dust you are, and dust you will return. So this word humus, which means ground, low, lowly, like dirt, is the basis for the words humble, humility, humiliation. Humble means modest or low estimates of one's importance, and it's throughout the text of the Bible to be humble. Humility is the act of lowering oneself in relation to God or others. Humiliation, which is what bullies do, is the act of lowering others in relation to oneself as if you are God. Just a few edits to the root word alters the meaning from modesty to meanness. And now we get to the cycle of bullying. This cycle of bullying is really an abuse cycle. It's about power and control, and we can see that there are 4 basic tenets in this cycle: threats, economic abuse, intimidation and emotional abuse, exclusion and ignoring, and physical and gang violence. Now, if we go to this next wheel, many of you may have seen this before. This is a domestic violence wheel. This is called the Duluth model. It's been going on since 1980 when it was created, and there's a website that's available in the resource of this presentation. We won't go through all of the steps here. It's just for illustration that the 4 tenets come from this: threats and economic abuse, intimidation and emotional abuse, exclusion and ignoring, and physical and gang violence. Most types of abuse fall into one of these 4 categories. So, who's the bully now? You can see we've got the question mark at the top of this cycle. There are at least 4 people in the cycle of bullying. There's the bully, the target, the bystander, and the upstander. Each person plays a dynamic role in the bullying cycle. The fact that bullying is a cycle is the important dynamic of our discussion today. This is the reason bullying is here to stay, and it's not going away. Let us be reminded of the case of the bullied students, Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, of the 1999 Columbine High School massacre. Since then, bullying has been more closely linked to high school violence in general. So who's directly involved are the bully and the target, sometimes known as the victim, and those less directly involved are the bystanders. You really have a couple of types of bystanders. You've got the active bystander, who can be called the henchman at times, who's called the henchman at times, and they're either joining in, laughing, and providing support, or you've got the passive bystander, who's just a part of the audience. What we know about bystanders is that they can effectively stop bullying within 10 seconds of an intervention by becoming an upstander. Upstanders are the people who go and get help or who stand up against the bully. So the best defense is a great offense. What we want to do is we want to turn these bystanders, this audience of bystanders, ourselves, when we're a bystander, we want to turn ourselves into upstanders. So what's a bystander? Most bullying occurs before an audience of bystanders who do nothing but watch. Why do they watch? Because they're afraid. They don't think that anybody's going to help them if the bullying were to turn on to them. They do feel guilty for not helping the victim. What we know is that by giving a silent audience is like attending a play. The performers think you came to watch because you approve of the show. When you leave the show early, the performers become insecure, asking themselves, is my performance weak? Are they turning the lights out to end the show? And so the bullying can stop just by not being a silent audience. So we want to empower our bystanders to become upstanders. And how do we do that? Well, it takes an enormous amount of courage to be an upstander. because they might be next in line to get bullied. So you want as many upstanders as possible. Upstanders, first thing, take responsibility for their indifference. The bystander is taking responsibility for their indifference, and that's when you become an upstander. The upstanders speak up about bullying, reaching out as a friend to the target, and asking for other people to help. Again, looking at this as our best defense is a great offense. The target of bullying often has to protect himself by deflecting the bullying onto someone else. At that moment, that target, when they deflect the bullying, it might go on to a bystander or an upstander. And at that moment, that target, to save themselves, became a momentary bully. So each one of us is at this risk for being a bully. Well, why don't we ask for help? In the situation of the principal, was it really the principal's intention to bully, or was it their intention to motivate the teacher for better outcomes? Well, why didn't the teacher get help? They may have been embarrassed to tell other people about this behavior. Sometimes people fear there's going to be backlash. There's a saying in some communities that snitches get stitches. They might be afraid that they're going to be judged for being weak or feel isolated or that no one cares. So how could the teacher get help in this situation if he felt bullied without feeling embarrassed, judged, getting some kind of backlash, or isolated by getting help? Well, here we are. We're right here working on getting some upstanders. We've used an example that maybe is familiar to people in the audience. This is the same feeling that a child has when they're the victim of bullying. So having that courage to be an upstander requires an equal amount of support from bystanders. The upstander may be next in line to be the target. Upstanders know a few things that some people don't know. They know that doing nothing contributes to the problem, and they want to get help or report the incident as soon as possible. These upstanders effectively stop bullying within 10 seconds of an intervention. I like to hold on to that moment. How do you know when you're being an upstander or if you're being a bully? We've all known the person who is the tattletale, who runs and tells everything. Well, are they really being an upstander, or at that point, are they being a bully? How do you know which side to take? In the story, the bullying cycle affects everyone, including the principal, when she gets bit by the dog while running. Who's going to stand up for the dog? Truly an underdog in this story. In this story, who's the real bully? Who's the target? Who's the bystander or the upstander? So we ask ourselves, are you a bully? Well, this depends. Some people say you don't know what it feels like to be bullied unless you've been bullied. Actually, that's true and false. What if we're all bullies? What if when we're making mistakes, sometimes intentionally or unintentionally, we're being a bully? So this slide talks about intention versus perception. And when we talk about the bully is intentional. This is what they want others to think, is that they're in power. Perception is what others think. Reality is perceptions, beliefs, and attitudes toward that which is real. And ontology, that's a big word, means the study of that which is real. We're going to focus on this just a minute and ask ourselves, when we think about a time when you tried to motivate your kid to do better in school or in sports, and the kid started crying and responded, "I'm doing the best I can." At that moment, the child felt bullied. It was his perception and his reality. This is the same as the example of the principal who talked to the teachers about test scores in the classroom. The teacher felt bullied because they were doing the best they could. The intention in both scenarios was to motivate toward better achievement, yet the perception was completely different. Perception can interfere with good intentions, blurring the reality. The upstander may actually be perceived as a bully. We can think that this principal was probably trying to make good on the demands of the school board, which was probably trying to make good on the demands of state regulatories. However, in that office at that moment, the teacher did not perceive that as their reality. In that moment, when you're trying to encourage a child to do better, they may not perceive that as their reality. So it's very important, again, to look at who's the bully and who's the target, which is why we want to stand up for both. And we want this to be a win-win situation. So now, what do we do about this? We're going to get a little biblical here, referring to the good book as our guide as to what do we do about bullying. And in Matthew 18:15, verses 15-17, it says, "If your brother sins against you, go and tell him what he did without other people hearing it. If he listens to you, you have won your brother back." Well, with the principal and the teacher and the student A versus student B and the dog and the principal, was there a misunderstanding? Did the principal really intend to humiliate the teacher? Well, at that point, the teacher had an opportunity to get clarification. And I actually learned this from a teacher this year. There's this thing called a bug and a wish technique when you're standing up for yourself. So how you do this is when somebody does something that you don't like, you say, "Hey, Kevin, when you do this, it really bugs me. I wish you wouldn't do it." So now you've had a gentle way of confronting the person about what you perceived was bullying behavior. Now it's up to that person, as Matthew 18:15 says, "Oh, I'm sorry. It was not my intention." Learning ways to say "I was wrong" and "I'm sorry" are deemed 2 of the 10 most powerful phrases for positive people by Rich DeVos, who's co-founder of Amway and the chairman of the NBA Orlando Magic. In verse 16, the good book says, "But if he will not listen to you, take 1 or 2 other people with you. Every word may be remembered by the 2 or 3 who heard." This is the role of upstanders. You get the facts. You get the story from several sources. You listen without blaming and first seek to understand. And then in the final verse of this quote, it says, "If he will not listen to them, tell the trouble to the church. If he does not listen to the church, think of him as a person who is as bad as one who does not know God and a person who gathers taxes." Isn't this timely on April 15th, tax day? Oh, my goodness. All righty. So the church of upstanders could be the counselor, the principal, the parent, the community, and possibly the police. So when we're looking at this church, if the principal, the teacher, and the counselor have worked with the student who is bullying repeatedly, when do you kick them out? When do you mandate therapy? When do you mandate anger management classes? When do you call the police? Well, this is the role of the church. We can support the target by listening and focusing on the target, assure them that the bullying was not their fault, know that it's difficult to discuss, give advice, work together to resolve the situation and get protection for the target. But let us not forget that we also have to work together to help the bully. We want to provide behavior modification strategies for the bully. And O. Weiss developed a multi-systematic program in Norway to prevent school bullying in grades 4 through 7, which utilizes behavior modification strategies for aggressive children, and the results have been phenomenal. There's a 50% reduction in self-reported bullying and victimization, reduced fighting, reduced theft, vandalism, and truancy. All these references will be at the end of this webinar on a slide. So we can model positive behavior and mentor the bully because we want a win-win situation. What we don't want to do, we want to avoid these mistakes. We don't want to ignore the bullying. As a child, I never learned how to ignore. I think I finally learned how to ignore last year. Came up with my own little definition, right? So ignore means to observe and dismiss. Well, if you're ignoring the bullying, you just became a bystander. That's not healthy. That's not what we want to do. We don't want to blame the child by telling them that they provoked the bullying. And we don't want to tell them to physically fight back. This is that nonviolent approach. The impact of bullying, the reason that we really must all be involved in this quest is because of the impact of bullying. The biggest impact is that it pushes us off the social ladder when we're bullied. And when you fall off the social ladder to the bottom rung and your basic needs seem like they're being infringed upon, your basic needs for food, shelter, security, you start to feel isolation. That's a little mini type of suicide. You may even go to a major depressive episode, losing your self-esteem, becoming anxious, having relationship problems, physical health problems can happen, a decline in schoolwork, and again, the major impact of bullying, as we saw with the Columbine situation, is that an increase of school violence and suicide and homicide happens. We can do something about this. We can do better. And one of the ways that we can do better is by determining what's bullying. When we're looking at 2 children or more having what could look like fun or play or kidding or joking or love taps or thumb wrestling, it could easily deteriorate into an intention to hurt, teasing, taunting, hitting, or slapping. So we want to determine if it's bullying. Oftentimes, there's a history with the kids. Sometimes there's a power imbalance. Sometimes this has happened before. Are these kids dating? Are they in a gang? And again, when we're determining if it's bullying, it doesn't really matter who started it. What really matters is that we want to help it to be resolved. So the signs and symptoms of being in the bully cycle are an increase in physical and verbal fights, that the person may have friends that are bullying. You may see the person become increasingly aggressive, sent to the principal's office more frequently, a lot of unexplained money or belongings, blaming other people for their problems, not accepting responsibility for their actions, and worrying about their reputation or popularity and having to get to the top of that social ladder and stay there. And that's a perception they may have. So how we stop the abuse and bullying is by being an upstander, not a bystander. School-based bullying prevention has been shown to produce a 50% reduction in self-reported bullying when it uses behavior modification strategies for aggressive children. The impact of these effective interventions is that schools report less violence when there are easily understood rules of conduct, when there are smaller class sizes, and fair discipline practices. How do we address the bullying behavior? Sometimes bullies don't even know they're being a bully. We teach the person about the problem behavior. We help the bully learn to say, I was wrong, I apologize, it was not my intention. We can address the bullying behavior by helping them, allowing them to clean up or repair for property damage, to do a project on civil rights and bullying. And we can also address the bullying behavior by modeling respectful behavior. The things that we want to avoid that we often see in schools, I'm not quite sure why we still see these because they don't work, is the 0 tolerance or 3 strikes. Suspension does not reduce bullying behaviors. It just moves it into a different place to happen. Group treatment doesn't work because it just reinforces bullying behavior in each other. What works, as we said, is modeling respectful behavior and going for the win-win. So we're almost at the conclusion of this webinar, and I'd like to say it's nice to be important, but it's more important to be nice. And as Gandhi said, be the change you wish to see in the world. Model behaviors you want to see. Start with kind words. When you're in authority, be aware of your communication. Your verbal and nonverbal posture is important. Your tone, rate, and rhythm of speaking are important because people have already put you at the top. And so when you're talking, they're already listening. And they're listening with intensity, and they may feel as if you're God. You may not have placed yourself there, but they may have placed you there. And so it's very important to have that humility that will allow you to not be perceived as a bully. Any questions?
You've done this before. You have a wonderful command of the topic, and you have a very important message. This is Dr. Carolyn King, MD, from Pine Rest Christian Mental Health Services, Inpatient Services. Also with us is Bob Vandepaul, who is Director of Employee and Church Assistance Programs at Pine Rest. And Bob, we have some questions.
Wonderful. Dr. King, thank you.
Thank you for that compliment. I'm flattered. I couldn't even say anything.
It's an important
coming from
message,
you.
and you have it well.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, Dr. King, some of the questions that have come in thus far. One is, how do you decide who's the bully? And Kevin asked that question as we kicked it off today. He said, okay, so you're the expert. Which one of us is the bully?
That's right.
You have the cycle. Who's the bully?
That's right. We all have the potential to be the bully. We all have the potential to be the bully. We were talking earlier in the car about the advocate. She's very much an advocate of non-vaccination, a Canadian woman. And it was good intentions. She just wanted to protect her children from all of this expensive vaccinations that, were going around. Well, all 7 of her children got the whooping cough because she didn't have them vaccinated. So then she realized she put the entire community at risk of getting whooping cough. What I like about this woman is this woman did the right thing. She said, I am sorry. I was wrong. I was acting ignorantly about not getting my children vaccinated out of fear. And now I've put the community at risk. She's now a proponent for vaccinations. So she went from being a bully of vaccinations to being an upstander for vaccinations. And it was just an amazing cycle that this woman went through in her own mind, and recognizing that it was initiated out of fear and ignorance. Out of fear and ignorance. And so whenever we start to feel that we are feeling like our resources are being threatened, that Maslow's hierarchy, and if we can get to that slide, maybe, I don't know if they still have access to that.
Take me a second.
Okay.
If you do that.
We can see that, those basic physiologic needs, when we perceive that they're being compromised, we start to become defensive. We start to protect. We get guarded. And at that point, we might respond in a way that's a bully. We might go to war with someone. We may have good intentions. We might be a little overzealous.
So perhaps one of the definitions of somebody who's not a bully is somebody who's has the humility to apologize.
Mm-hmm.
And a bully would be somebody who humiliates and doesn't apologize.
Absolutely. Putting yourself on that God pedestal will get you at bully from 0 to 60 in 1 second.
It sure will. Mm-hmm. We all want to be God for part of the job description.
The easy part.
Easy part. Okay. So we have some other questions too. And Dr. King, here's one. Bullying is a term that's misused a lot.
Absolutely.
And how do we differentiate between teasing, a joke, ribbing, and bullying, as you have defined it?
Yes, that is a very good question. So if you're on the outside looking in and you don't really know the two people involved, then you're perceiving what's going on with them. So the first thing to do, if you're a bystander, you're part of that audience, and you're watching, you can ask the person who you think is the target, hey, are you okay with that? Or you can say to the bully, hey, knock it off. If they say, oh, no, it's okay, well, then they're not engaging necessarily in bullying behavior. This is how they play. If there's not a power differential, if these are two people who are equal in the scale of power, then it's not necessarily bullying. Bullying, you'll see, will have someone trying to be more powerful than the other. That's a surefire way to know that it's bullying that you're seeing, is when there's abuse going on. That power and control.
And so the important thing is the perception of the person who's being targeted.
And the intention. The perception and intention are the major qualities that happen in bullying.
Okay. Somebody really liked your bug in the wish.
Oh, I love that. I got that from teachers.
Statement. Really like that. Another question is, how do you respond to a bully who may present as passive and say, I didn't really mean that?
Passive-aggressive behavior. Okay, that's what we call it in psychiatry. And it happens all the time. People who are passive-aggressive, and they'll say, again, I didn't mean that. I was just joking. And you say, you know what? This is how I handle it. I say all jokes have to have a basis in reality, or else it's not funny. Has to have a basis in reality, or else it's not funny. And that basis in reality that you use offended me. Mm-hmm. I do not like that. It bugs me when you say things like that, and I wish you wouldn't say them, okay? Things like calling someone fat or ugly or, laughing at someone's economic status, okay? It bugs me when you do that, and I wish you wouldn't, and then if they don't, you go back to the Matthew 15:17, and you go get some more people to help you out, right?
So just because something was funny doesn't make it right?
No, not necessarily. Not necessarily. And they may not have known that you were going to be offended, It may have been okay in one situation, and then in another situation, it wasn't okay with them. It may have embarrassed them. It may have humiliated them in front of their friends. It was something you could do in private but not in public.
Okay. Have a question. Do you consult on specific situations and offer trainings?
Well, not that I have done just yet, other than this webinar. We often go out and talk about bullying So.
Okay. Dr. King, how about if people can connect with me?
Absolutely.
And I will field those and simmer those down and bring them to you, and we can see what options exist. And,
that is a healthy answer to give.
How's that? Okay. And truthful. And truthful. Have a question here. What modifications would you make specific to an elementary setting versus a secondary school setting?
Ask the question one more time.
So if you're a principal of an elementary school, or you're a third grade teacher, would you deal with bullying any differently than if you were at a high school and it was to 11th graders?
Well, with this presentation, I really tried to make it as reproducible and generalizable across the lifespan as possible. And so when we look at behavior modification, we've got behavior modification for everything that we can imagine. There's behavior, when you're looking at little kids, their behaviors are pretty raw, and they don't know a lot about how to behave and how not to behave. And they're really easily shaped. They model well. They follow modeling well. They're sort of like little ducks, and they'll imprint on the best role models around them. As you get older into middle school, the middle school age is more about peer relations and fitting into groups and who's cool and who's not cool. And in high school, those groups are well established, and so they're really trying to fit in with their either sports group or cheerleading group or academic group. And so really allowing the person to be a star in the niche that they're in. That's the same thing we do as adults, is you want to support people in what they're good at, and you want to help move them in that direction so that their career, their life, everything they're doing, their reason to live is what they're good at and what their career goal is. So I hope I'm answering the question. You really want to do that behavior modification so you're helping the kid go towards their career, okay? And you don't want their career to be a criminal. And
professional bully.
A professional bully, because professional bullies end up in jail.
That's good, good. Here's a tough question.
Okay.
What if a student is being bullied at home? Because schools may have 25 kids seated in the seats, but those represent 25 families plus. So what if you have a sense that that's happening at home, and now the cycle is moving in the opposite direction of your initial illustration?
So you want to be an upstander for the student, and you also want to be an upstander for the parent. The parent may have been bullied in their home. It wasn't many generations ago where corporal punishment was the norm. And so, I grew up in that generation where that was the norm. And so the behavior modification, because it was modeled for them that this is what you do. And so now they're doing it. And so to change that cycle really requires a concerted effort of education. Every day we're learning how to be nonviolent. Every day we're learning. We've not mastered it. I don't know that we will.
That's for sure.
And so that's why the topic, who's the bully now? Because it means we, each and every one of us, have to take responsibility for our own bullying behaviors, whether it was intentional or perceived, because we're all at risk.
It's really easy to think of one person as being one role and not to realize that John or Sue could fit all four roles in the span of 2 hours. And how they experience that leads to them filling those other roles as well.
Exactly.
Sounds like the better question is, who's going to be the upstander here?
I love that.
I've been able to sit back and listen.
Oh, okay. Okay.
We have a list of references, and this is quite a substantial list. And two of our questioners have asked, for references about things you've talked about, are these ranked from most helpful, top down? Which of these were the most helpful to you?
That's a good question. My favorite is stopbullying.gov. Of course, I have to give the first top billing to pinerest.org. I've got to do that.
Good choice.
But then stopbullying.gov is a government website that has cartoons, and I am a child psychiatrist, so I love cartoons. So that's why that makes it to the top. NAMI is very reputable, National Alliance for Mentally Ill. It's an organization of people who have loved ones. It's supported by physicians. The etymology of bully, of course, I just put that in because that's where I got some of the etymology of the definitions. One of my favorites, because I'm on the committee and I'm looking for it, would be Facts for Families Bullying, ACAP.org. And what ACAP is the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, and it is our national organization. There are about 7,000 child and adolescent psychiatrists in the country, and we are also adult psychiatrists. We've got not only Facts for Families, we've got resource centers that provide a plethora of information about every disorder that affects children, from families going into the military, what to do when your parent is deployed, just a whole host of things. And so I tried to be as comprehensive as I could with this.
That is a comprehensive one. Let's see. I think we have we had your email address on here. We lost it. I think it's at the beginning. If
Bob is good.
We pretty much, well, we can get to you through Bob.
Absolutely.
Sure can.
Okay.
We sure can.
That'll be good. Yeah, we don't have we lost your email address, but you still get email, so that's okay.
Yes, and Bob would be great too.
I would be glad to filter those.
Yes.
Okay. Well, you'll get the stack because we almost always get a couple of questions after we're done. Dr. King, thank you very much.
Oh, thank you for having me.
You have a very good message, or you have an important message, and you present it very well. Dr. Carolyn King, MD, Inpatient Services at Pinerest Christian Mental Health Services, and Bob Vandepaul, Director of Employee and Church Assistant Programs at Pinerest. And this webinar will be available to you on the Christian Schools International website shortly. That's csionline.org. And you can review or share with anyone you may be interested. If it's your first visit, take a look at the archive of webinars. Contact us at webinars@csionline.org. This is Kevin Richards from Christian Schools International. Thank you for joining us and for all that you do for our children.